ridiculous. Let's fast forward a few years when Wade-Robson decides to come out with his accusations. I can hear it now. Wade wakes up one morning and decides to tell his wife, "Hey, I was thinking, I was close with Michael Jackson. Maybe I could tell everyone that he diddled and pulled on my penis." Whoa, Wade, I don't think you should do that. I mean, that's probably not a good thing. No, I think maybe I should. I think we could probably, maybe we could get some money. Why not, right? But Wade, Michael Jackson, that's like your hero. You don't want to go around telling the world he did that. No, but we could get some money. But Wade, there's no guarantee you're going to get any money. It's been years and are you sure? Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Why not? It'll be a little embarrassing. I'll probably just go to counseling for a little bit, and I'll tell the counselor this, and then we'll stage this whole thing. It'll be really worth it. Okay, yeah, I'm in. Let's call your mom. Hey, Mom. Yes, Wade. Hey, I was thinking, I ain't got much to do lately, so I think I should tell the world Michael Jackson pulled on my Peter. Oh, yeah, that's a really good idea. I'll call your brother and let him know, and then you can call your sister. Okay, yeah, will do. So they just all...
Welcome to the Roberta Glass True Crime Report. Today I have a very special guest, Tuesday Money, who hosts the Elephant Lounge podcast on Podbeam and has an excellent blog called The Elephant Lounge at theelephantlounge.org. And we're going to talk a little bit about Michael Jackson leaving Neverland and the conversation around that topic. So welcome, Tuesday.
Hello, thank you. Thank you for having me.
So first, can you talk a little bit about yourself and what made you want to talk about Michael Jackson?
Okay, well, I'm not terribly interesting. I have a background in theater. I did a lot of improv and professional theater. I also went back to school to study chemistry. And now I am a writer. I've been a writer for about 10 years now. And I have talked about Michael Jackson since 2008 when I started. Actually, it was 2009 because it was after he died. And that kind of sparked everything, and I realized, oh, wow, there's a bunch of people online who actually think Michael Jackson is innocent. And I've been, talking about it ever since then.
Yeah, and battling it out with these people, too. You say on your podcast that you were one of the last people to kind of come around to realize that Michael Jackson is guilty. How did you change your mind?
Yeah, in my social circle, I think it was whenever the topic came up, it seemed to me that the majority of people had already believed he was a pedophile. I sort of held out, but then when 2003 came along, and then the trial, something didn't sit well with me, so that's when I decided to look online, see if I could find the documents, see if I could find something, and I did. And I think the one thing that I guess convinced me were the psychiatrist interviews with Jordan and with Gavin. And that was the realization where it just hit me at once. And I realized nobody made this stuff up. No adult made this up. No child made this up. This is real. And that's when I officially turned.
And what do you think that the sort of, how has it changed? I mean, you've been following this, you say, for 10 years. Has the opinion of the country changed, do you think, especially after leaving Neverland?
I definitely think the majority of people know that Michael Jackson was a pedophile. I think this latest interest has brought out some people who are interested and they're trying to find a cause maybe. But for the most part, at least here in the United States, I truly believe the majority of people really do know and understand that Michael Jackson was a pedophile.
You say on your podcast that a lot of the supporters are from abroad. Why do you think that is?
That's a good question. I don't have access to all their media. I assume that the BBC is pretty good. I mean, the stuff that I've seen, anyway. Excuse me. But I can't really say for sure. I wonder, I speculate, this is just my opinion, that perhaps because the United States does have freedom of the press, freedom of speech, people are able to talk about things much more freely. I believe that might be why people are more informed here, whereas elsewhere they don't really have that liberty. And with Michael Jackson, I do believe there's a bit of a protection there because he brought so many people together with his music. And we like to wax poetic about our celebrities and how wonderful they are. And I think people buy into that. They want that dream, that fantasy that Michael Jackson gave to people. He represented, he represented Disney and Pepsi and all things sparkles and children and candy, and people want to hang on to that. So I'm not sure specifically, but that's just my estimation. Maybe we just have a little bit more freedom here in the United States.
That's a really good point you make about fantasy, because you hear in Leaving Neverland all the time from the mothers that it was a fantasy, it was a fairy tale. And I was reading the opening statement of the prosecutor who talked about how their Disney music was piped in, and that music was piped in, and that the train station, and we'll get to the train station later, the now very famous train station, that it was built based on the train station at Disney. So I had no idea. So he really worked on creating this fantasy and creating illusion.
Yeah, it was a pedophile's paradise, is what I've learned. Some of the investigators that went onto the ranch, that was something that they had said. The house, everything, was decorated in a way to attract children.
And I found it very interesting that they had such trouble selling it, too. I wasn't surprised, obviously, after Michael Jackson wanted to sell the Neverland Ranch, that there weren't a lot of takers who wanted a Ferris wheel in their backyard or whatever, So
who would want that?
Yeah, I guess another rich pedophile, but it does attract attention, right?
Exactly.
So, so do you think that this is an orchestrated? Do you think some of these people because right after Leaving Neverland came out, we had the explosion of YouTube videos about Michael Jackson's innocence, and also an explosion of people on Twitter all talking about Michael Jackson's innocence and how Wade-Robson and James Safechuck were liars. Do you think some of those people are paid people? Is this an orchestrated PR campaign? Are all of these people fans?
That's a good question. I do believe some of these channels were around long before Leaving Neverland. I know a few of them have been around for a while, and they've just been going on and on and on about Michael Jackson for years.
Uh-huh.
And so I do think that they sort of sparked other people to make their own videos and stuff. For the most part, a lot of these people have been around for a while. Do I think they're being paid? Do I think the Jackson estate would pay money to these people? I don't think so. Mm-hmm. I think that these people are a little bit, how do I say this kindly, unstable. If you watch some of the things that they say and how they say it, and something's not right.
Right, there's the clips in Leaving Neverland. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I don't want to be mean or anything, but there does seem to be some people who are a little off, we'll say. And even on comments on my podcast, I've had people leave one paragraph novels on my podcast, just going on and on and on, and I can't even figure out half of the stuff that they're saying because it's just mumble jumble. So these are kind of the types of people. I'm not saying everyone. I'm not, saying they're all a little off or whatever, but a lot of them are. And I think that there's a lot of people out there that want a cause. They want to be a part of something. And this is it for them. So they make videos and they put out this stuff and it makes them feel good. And they have this group of people. We've seen these dynamics before. We saw it with Stephen Avery. We've seen it with West Memphis 3. We've seen it with all of these cases. Amanda Knox, we talked about her before. There's just certain people out there, they like to be a part of something.
And it's interesting, too, because as the public opinion has changed, supporting Michael Jackson becomes the minority position, the underdog position. So maybe there is some kind of or some kind of, I don't know, they get something out of, railing against what they perceive as the man, right?
Exactly.
You read one part, one comment where a Michael Jackson supporter talks about high-priced prosecutors. And you say, I can't even say that without laughing. And, of course, I'm laughing, too, because I go to court, I see the materials, and this is New York City, the materials that the prosecutor has are, the TVs are old, where the money is in the defense. I don't think they understand that. Do you?
Exactly. No, obviously they don't understand this. They think that the government is just out to attack people. I don't think people understand that no one is going to go after a high-profile celebrity like Michael Jackson unless they really feel they've got a good case here. To think otherwise is just naive. You're not going to go up against a celebrity that has access to these attorneys. Michael Jackson hired the best of the best, and they knew he was going to hire the best of the best. This isn't difficult to figure out. Going up against somebody without a case, without evidence, that's suicide for a prosecutor.
And you found it very interesting that Michael Jackson knew exactly who to call, who would, exactly his victims who would who might speak in support of him. He called James Safechuck, he called Wade-Robson, who the prosecutors also had information, other staff had seen them abused. So it was interesting that Michael Jackson had a really good idea of who might go to bat for him.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. He was very manipulative. He knew how to work people. He knew exactly what he was doing.
And so let's talk about just some of the people who've spoken out in support of Michael Jackson. One is John Branca, who's the executor of the Michael Jackson estate. So no interest there in preserving his legacy. And the other is John Ziegler, who was a kind of shock jock conservative radio show host, who most recently supported Paterno, and then Jerry Sandusky arranged the interview with Dottie Sandusky and Matt Lauer. And yet these supporters, I see them pointing to John Ziegler, who has a video called The Last Word on Leaving Neverland and Michael Jackson. And not one of them questions why Jerry Sandusky, I mean, that's a rare bird, don't you think? Rare breed, rare bird, the Jerry Sandusky supporter.
Seems like a slam dunk to me, but I guess.
You know why he would be now defending Michael Jackson and attacking his alleged victims, right?
It's a little creepy. I mean, it all goes back to what I was saying before with some of these people. There's something a little off, and I'm not saying with everybody. I'm not trying to make that blanket statement there, but there's something a little off about that guy.
And so So how much are James Safechuck and Wade Robson suing the Jackson estate for? Is it
That's a
in the
good
billions?
question. I don't know. I read the complaint when it first came out. Okay, so it's been a couple of years now. I do have to go over some of this stuff again and refresh my brain. But from what I understand, the whole case is, if they do ever make it to trial, and the jury would decide what their compensation was. I don't know specifically where the 1.5 billion or 100 billion figure comes from. If somebody knows, that's great. Please send it to me, because I've been looking for it and I've asked about it before. I haven't been able to find it except in some publications, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm not saying it's not there. Please don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that number is not out there in the documents. I just haven't found it. I asked a couple people who have read the documents very recently, and they said the same thing to me. They said, I don't remember it. I'm not saying it's not there. They just don't remember seeing it. So.
Uh-huh. And so, their defense is always poking holes, at specifics.
Right.
But let's talk about some of the kind of patterns of Michael Jackson. And one of them is his relationship with women. And you made an excellent point that no women have come to testify that they had a passionate affair with Michael Jackson, or he's never been extorted for money by a woman. And
right.
You bring up Debbie Rowe, who's largely forgotten. Who was Debbie Rowe?
Now, from what I understand, she was a nurse at this, where he went to get his plastic surgery. And the only thing that the public really knows about her is that she wanted to have babies for Michael Jackson and give him her babies. That's the only personality she was allowed, I guess, is the best way to put it. She was just, I don't know about you, but I remember her coming out of nowhere, right? It was after Lisa Marie Presley, that whole thing. And then all of a sudden, he's marrying this Debbie Rowe. Who the hell is Debbie Rowe? Right. And I just don't know that she was ever given a chance to get her story out there. So I don't terribly know much about her, other than she was just this nurse and she just loved Michael Jackson so much and she just wanted to give him her babies.
Right, and she didn't want any she didn't insist on any relationship with him. It was very much like she was a baby factory. Talk about Handmaid's Tale. And that's never questioned by Michael Jackson's fans. Why? And there was one interview. Now, I don't know if he was referring to Debbie Rowe or if he was referring to another one of his, children.
I think it was the Blanket's mother. Supposedly there's another woman.
Okay, that he grabbed after the child was born, minutes after after the delivery. He talks about grabbing the baby with the placenta and rushing out of the hospital with it, like a baby thief.
Yeah.
And I've always been disturbed by that interview, and it was like, they said, well, don't you think a baby needs a mother? Oh, no, baby says a baby doesn't need a mother. And something that Jordan Chandler talked about was a mantra that Jackson had him recite, which was no wenches, bitches, heifers, or hoes. So what was the root of this hatred that Michael Jackson had for women?
Okay, my theory, and I believe it's backed up a little bit by some psychology and stuff that I've read about abuse, is a lot of times when a child is abused by a parent, and in Michael's case it was his father, we know his father was abusive, a lot of times children will actually develop even more resentment toward the other parent. Even though they're not the abusive one, they allow it to happen. They don't do anything, or they don't stand up to the abuser. So there's this undercurrent of resentment and hate. And so it's common, from what I understand, that victims of this type of abuse, like whether it was physical and mental, I don't know if he was sexually abused. I've never been able to confirm that. But he may have very well developed a resentment towards women in general because his mother was always such a weak figure. That's my theory of where that may have came from. But it certainly looks as though he did sort of have this, maybe it wasn't conscious in many ways, but it developed at some time. He kind of went after Diana Ross, if you remember. He looked up to her and he wanted to sort of be her, but then he ended up sort of stabbing her in the back and
How
telling
so? I don't know this story. How so?
Okay, so he had this fascination with Diana Ross, and when the Jackson 5 came out from Gary, Indiana, okay, they moved to California, and they initially left Catherine there, okay, and so it was the boys, and then they moved in with Diana Ross. And the story that they all pitched to the media was that Diana Ross discovered the Jackson 5. That was the story for a very long time. And I guess Diana Ross got married, and Michael Jackson was so irritated by the whole situation. He didn't attend, he didn't do anything, and he ended up doing a documentary type thing on the Jacksons later on, and they made it a big point to say Diana Ross did not discover them. You know, Diana Ross did not discover me. So he would make these little jabs at her, and he stopped attending stuff, and he stopped doing stuff with her. So I don't know where that comes from, and I don't know why it played out that way. But something about him, he has these sort of toxic relationships with women, I guess. That's the best way I can put it. But I would venture to guess it might have something to do with his mother.
Yeah, it seems like women always serve a purpose, and Elizabeth Taylor was an interesting advocate for Michael Jackson. Why do you think I know they were both child stars, but why do you think she advocated for Michael Jackson, was sort of like mouthpiece for him for so many years?
That one I don't know much about. I know that Tatum O'Neal tried being friends with him as well, and they had sort of a bit of a connection as well because they were both child actors or child performers and stuff. I think as you rightly pointed out, he does seem to use what he can from people, and then he moves on from them. People are tools in his world. And I think with women, he just typically felt he could do that. But why these other people stick up for him or do what they do, it could be a number of reasons. I mean, how many times do you have a relationship with someone and you think that they care as much about you as you do them, and you find out that that didn't happen?
Yeah. I don't know if I'm remembering this correctly, but I believe it's in one of Carrie Fisher's books. She talks about Elizabeth Taylor having kind of an arrangement with Michael Jackson, where Michael Jackson gives her jewels and she, speaks out in support of him. It kind of, very hookerish. Prostitution-like, if, in my opinion. I found it very interesting because everybody knows that Elizabeth Taylor loved jewelry, and it also reminded me of him giving a Cartier bracelet to Jordan Chandler's mother.
Yes.
So did Michael Jackson profile his victims and profile the family as well, do you think?
I don't know if he did it consciously or unconsciously. I don't know, but most pedophiles do. in some way. They pick out certain people that they know that they can manipulate. As long as they know that they can manipulate somebody in some way, they test the waters, obviously, and then they go from there. It does appear as though Michael Jackson, according to everything that I've read, that there have been cases where he's tested the waters, has failed, and have pulled back. So there's a number of kids who may have made a connection with him, but because maybe they had solid parents or maybe they had someone that said no or whatever, that he would pull back from those kids.
And Corey Feldman, who's spoke out for years, I think it's ended now after leaving Neverland. That seemed to have convinced him, or at least given him pause.
He got a lot of backlash. That's why.
You think
ultimately.
It's just public pressure?
Absolutely.
He was very vocal in saying that Michael Jackson never molested me. But you play a tape from LaToya Jackson in one of your episodes where LaToya Jackson describes Michael Jackson telling her, "Keep Corey Feldman away from me. He's so annoying." But even in finding him annoying, Corey Feldman admits that Michael Jackson showed him some disturbing images of sexually transmitted diseases, close-ups of genitals, things like that.
Yeah, that story's been around for a long time. I want to say about 10 years now is when he first told the story about going over to Michael Jackson's, and I want to say it was his Century City apartment or whatever, and there was a book on his coffee table, and it had something to do with, there were naked women, but then they showed depictions of diseases, but it was very graphic in nature. And Michael Jackson said, "Hey, have you seen this?" It was like he was introducing him to that material. And he always said that was a little weird. Well, it was interesting with Corey Feldman because then all of a sudden he doesn't say anything about this, right, for a long time. And somebody must have found the story or remembered it or whatever and presented it to him. And then he did eventually talk about it later on again. But he tried to ignore what he had said before, right? He tried saying, "Oh, no, nothing happened." But that story got brought up in his face again, so.
So he had to address it.
Yeah.
So, speaking of this book, what was found when they raided Neverland Ranch? And did the FBI investigate for 10 years and find nothing?
No. No, the FBI did not cover this case, people. No, the FBI covers federal crimes. They did help, obviously, with some computer stuff, I guess. And they had the equipment to mirror stuff. And that's basically you just hook up the computer, right? And you allow the system to do its thing. It gets put on a drive, and then you send it back to the police. There's no, they're not going to bother with anything more, right? They may have helped with some investigating techniques and things like that. There's 300 pages that we still aren't totally aware of that the FBI hasn't put out, but most of that investigation has to do with various threats that were made to Michael Jackson. He really did have some really crazy stuff happen to him with some fans. One woman had sent him a gun, and he actually kept the gun, which was a little weird to people, but this woman had said she birthed his children, and I mean, he had some really crazy things go on. So that's what the FBI would investigate ultimately. As far as what was found, there were 3 books that are technically art books. They fall under that category. But because Michael Jackson was being investigated for child molestation, that turns into child erotica. One of these books in particular was edited and produced by 2 convicted pedophiles. And the material was stated by all the law enforcement, including Dworin, who was the lead detective. They had said this material is typically used by pedophiles as grooming material. And the reason why pedophiles like this material has to do with the fact that it's legal to possess because it's not considered child pornography, but rather child erotica. And for certain pedophiles, especially someone like Michael Jackson, who would be categorized as a loving pedophile, so to speak, these types of people don't want to see children being violated. They like to see them in their innocence. That's why you see, or that's why they say things like, children are so godly and they remind me of God and they're heavenly, and, you know, all that language that Michael Jackson used. That's very common for a pedophile.
Interesting. You have a video on your playlist of Leaving Neverland called, I think it's called something like, it's made by someone else, called Is Michael Jackson a Pedophile? And it talks about just looking at some evidence that I'd not heard of before. One was the video game that he produced, and in that video game you had to collect children.
I saw that. Yeah, there was a video game that I don't know what it was called. I want to say it was in the 87, maybe 80, 88, somewhere around there. And yeah, you had to collect children.
And then another part was Michael Jackson, exactly what you're describing, ripping out a picture from a hotel magazine of kids and talking about seeing gods in their face, sort of like ripping them out like someone else would rip out a underwear ad or something, you know, not
well, I don't know about you.
racy.
Back then I was ripping out pages of Robert Downey Jr., okay?
Right, exactly.
And I think the men were ripping out pages of, I don't know, Christy Brinkley. I mean, you know, there was a lot of hot women back then.
Right, bikini pictures. It was kind of, you know, he ripped it out. It wasn't concerned with you know, destroying the hotel property, and kind of held it to his heart, too. Do you remember that?
Oh, yes. It was just so disturbing. It was so disturbing.
And obviously, if you're a Michael Jackson supporter, you'll say, that doesn't mean anything. But, and again, I point out that it doesn't mean anything on its own, but just the the whole facts all together, you know, all the stories combined create a picture of a pedophile.
Exactly. And that's where it gets back to what you had mentioned about poking holes in arguments. You have to look at things as they are given in their totality. You cannot isolate things and pretend everything occurs in a vacuum and then you're going to knock it down that way. No, you have to remember that you have all these elements together. And I have said before, you know, if you have an alarm system for your bedroom, that's one thing. Okay, fine, he's a celebrity. On its own, that's not a big deal. But when you couple it with a room hidden in a room, and then you have pornography everywhere, and you have the accusations, and you have the multiple payouts, and you have the magazine, and you have all this stuff, and you add it all together, come on.
Yeah,
it's obvious what was going on here.
I just saw an interview with Mark Lester's daughter. Mark Lester was a child star in the UK and now is famous for being Michael Jackson's friend. That's his calling card. So of course he's going to support Michael Jackson, right? Because without that, he's really no one. And his daughter was asked, well, don't you think it's odd, had it been anyone else, had it been another middle-aged man sleeping with young boys, wouldn't you think that was odd? And even she admitted, yes, it was. odd to sleep with little boys. And when you look at I think there's a video of all the boyfriends by year. I mean, child friends, excuse my insensitive description, childhood, alleged victims, really, year by year. And it really, you see a pattern of type and just a pattern of an abuser.
Yeah, definitely. There was an age group. There was almost a look. You never saw him with, portly children or unattractive children. They were all very nice-looking little boys.
He never wanted to sleep with girls, even though
There is one girl, the Jane Doe.
Okay.
You've heard about that one, right?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so if you look up Jane Doe and Michael Jackson, there is a complaint that came out, and I believe it was around the time between Wade and James. And they do have a picture of her. I think some people have kind of figured out who it might be specifically, but I don't know the name for sure. In any case, she does appear to have some evidence of her being with Michael Jackson. He may have very well done something. Apparently, she was paid out some money, close to $800,000, and he had given the family money. So it doesn't surprise me. Pedophiles typically are attracted to children. Obviously, he had a preference for boys, without a doubt. But do I believe this young girl? Yeah, I do. I absolutely do.
And another pattern is that they all were encouraged to dress like him and look like him. Why do you, and become mini MJs? Why do you think that was?
Oh, he's a narcissist.
Okay.
He's a complete narcissist. I mean, he loves himself. He put himself above everyone. You look back at some of his life. He was a Jehovah's Witness, and I don't know if you're aware of this. I just found this out, so please forgive me if you've already heard this before. But I was shocked because I didn't know about this. Apparently, some of the church members they did not like the things that he was doing, right, with the Thriller, and they did not like him promoting any of the things that he was promoting. They said it was damaging and stuff, but there were other people in the church that had actually broke away and said, no, Michael Jackson is like the second Jesus. We need to, conform to him and listen to him. So they basically, in essence, fed him this belief that he was just like Jesus. And I have no doubt that went to his head.
Interesting, because Dan Reed, the director of Leaving Neverland, makes a point to note that Michael Jackson often had his stage shows bathe him in light, and he would strike a pose like Jesus.
Yes.
With his arms stretched out. And also the giant statues of himself, kind of like Stalin. So it was like Jesus, and then there was another element that was very militaristic, very fascistic. I don't know if you agree with this or not, but I was looking at his halftime show and the outfits, and he, he's one of the person who helped. I think maybe directed the show. Said when Michael Jackson's on stage, he's like a general, and I just very interesting.
Yeah. He was very much in control of all of his shows. He had to be very much, even when he toured with the Jackson 5, the last tour that they did, he was starting off on his own, and he was very resentful about having to do this tour. But he made sure he was in control of every single aspect of that tour. So he was very, he had this complex about himself where he had to be in control. He thought of himself as the most wise of everyone. He knew everything. Very selfish, very narcissistic. He had photos of himself, portraits, as you said, the statues. And then, of course, you have the children. Okay, you need to dress like me. And then what you said before with going on stage and looking like Jesus and having the children genuflect to him, it just sick. It's just sick is what it is. And we saw this play out in our faces. He dangled this stuff in our faces, and we just sat and clapped and cheered it on.
Yeah, have you ever seen that documentary? I think it's made in the UK, I believe, called The Boy He Paid Off, about Jordan Chandler?
Yes.
And they talk about Michael Jackson being at an event with some royalty there and having a child, I can't remember if it was Jordy or another child, on his lap. I think it was Jordan Chandler, and bouncing him up and down and whispering in his ear, rubber, 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 and his management saying, you're going to have to sit, Jordan Chandler or whatever is going to have to sit in this seat. You can't do this. And he refused.
Yes.
So there was a real element, when he brought Brooke Shields, he also brought, I can't think of his
Emmanuel
name.
Lewis.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to say Webster, right? Too, as a date. And one of the more interesting things that's come out is that verifies James Safechuck's story of shopping for rings with Michael Jackson when Michael Jackson was wearing a disguise. They found news footage of it. It made the news. And James Safechuck said, I would pretend that my finger was exactly the size of some woman's finger. But the fans say that Michael Jackson was there buying a ring for Brooke Shields.
That's I don't even think that'd be the right year, right? Because Brooke Shields was out of the picture before James Safechuck came into the picture, if I remember the timeline correctly. No, he had actually said he was buying a ring for Sheryl Crow.
At the time, but I thought I saw a YouTube video saying, "Oh no, he was buying it for Brooke Shields."
No,
I know
he had
the
no
end of the
interest
video.
in Brooke Shields.
I know.
Yeah, Brooke Shields pushed herself onto him.
Well, and Madonna too. Also went with him as a publicity stunt, so they kind of used each other. And apparently she said some insensitive things about Michael Jackson's victims, but no one has been quite as insensitive as Barbra Streisand.
That one blew me away. I did not understand that at all.
Yeah, I have a little insight. I know someone who worked with her.
Okay.
So the gift at the end of the movie was a box set of her singing. So the cast and crew of the movie that she directed, she gave everybody a box set of her music. So you would think that maybe she's a little bit of a narcissist and that they're maybe not known for their compassion.
Oh, yeah, she definitely is a narcissist. I mean, without a doubt.
It was very...
But I did that. I was blown away by that. I couldn't believe what she said. It was something like, well, he's got his preferences.
Right. Everybody has their preferences, as if it were like being gay or very normalizing pedophilia, and that it was okay because both of them got married and turned out okay. But after you see the movie and you see that both of them had nervous breakdowns, James Safechuck had issues with drugs and alcohol, still says his life is still not normalized. Wade-Robson looks a little bit more further along on the healing process. How insensitive. So if they look maybe put together and don't look like they haven't turned into Charles Manson, I mean, what is the... I'm just wondering what she thinks how would it be obvious that they weren't okay, is my question.
I have no idea. I mean, the ignorance of that statement is just bizarre to me. But someone like that, I mean, how do you even get through to somebody like that?
And I
Because
think
she doesn't have anybody around her to tell her no. And that's the same thing with Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson didn't have anybody around him to say no. And even if they did, he turned them down. You know, he wasn't going to listen to anybody. That's the problem with these celebrities, is that they don't have any feedback to come back at them. I do something stupid. Let me tell you something. My friends are in my face, okay? Like, Tuesday, you're an idiot, okay? That's how friends are, right?
Mm-hmm.
These people don't have real friends. That's part of the problem.
You had an interesting take on Macaulay Culkin. And he's
Mm-hmm.
given interviews in saying he wasn't molested by Michael Jackson, and that what we don't understand, that Michael Jackson's bedroom was enormous, meaning that it was so big that he could maintain appropriate boundaries. I guess that's what he means. What was your take on his interviews?
Oh, they're just rehearsed. I mean, he says the same thing every time, and he does not give a credible denial. Now, I'm not an expert on statement analysis, but I've been around the game for a while to know a little bit about statement analysis. And one of the things they talk about is a credible denial. And that is something that Macaulay Culkin cannot do. He immediately jumps into this diatribe of Michael Jackson in his big room. Well, that's all fine and dandy, but when he testified at trial, he said he slept in the bed with Michael Jackson. The maid, Francia, stated that she never had to make the other bed in his room. There was only one bed that needed to be made because they slept in the bed together. So I don't know why he's carrying on about this big room when he testified that he slept in the same bed with Michael Jackson alone. And the staff even had stated that he was left there at the Neverland Ranch with Michael Jackson alone, not with his little brother or, and sister, Kieran Culkin, and then he had another sister, I think. But they said that he was alone with Michael Jackson for a week at a time.
And some people have said to me, well, Michael Jackson wouldn't touch him because he's too famous. He knows he would get in trouble. And I thought, well, Michael Jackson's judgment, not known for his judgment and restraint. And I had the same reaction. I didn't believe Macaulay Culkin either. He said something like nothing happened at all. And anytime anyone says something happened in the negative, meaning they're telling me about something that didn't happen, my ears prick. It's just
Right. He says nothing happened, not really. I mean, his room is so big. Those are his exact words, not really. He sneaks that in there when you listen to him, especially on the Larry King interview that he does. It's really quite disturbing. But I think being famous, as Macaulay Culkin was, would be even more of a thrilling experience for Michael Jackson as a predator, right? And he had total access to this child. And I also believe that the reason, well, there's many reasons why Macaulay Culkin is lying, but one being of which he probably doesn't feel that any of it affected him because he grew up so quickly. So in his mind, he probably really believes that, well, I had a good time. I was fine with it. It didn't hurt me. It didn't bother me. So I'm not going to worry about it. That's the psychology, I think, that goes on in his head. And I say that for a number of reasons. Number one, because he's always been a little bit of an arrogant person in general, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I also just believe that the other problem that he has is he's godfather to all three of those kids.
I didn't know that. I thought that was such a great point.
Yeah.
That Michael Jackson really knows who to keep close, you say.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, what are you going to do with that? You're going to come out against that's an ugly situation. My mind goes in all sorts of different directions. I can't even keep straight the thoughts that I'm thinking when I try and put myself in that situation, right? When you try and find empathy for that and you try and put yourself in what he must be going through, I got 10 wheels spinning, and they're all going in different directions at different paces.
And he also says something in that interview that I wasn't like the other kids. I was special because I was a celebrity and I wasn't impressed by him. And I thought it was just an interesting statement, like, I'm not like the other alleged victims. I'm special. I'm stronger. I'm more. And that was something that Michael Jackson really developed with his victims, that I bought Neverland Ranch for you, he says to James Safechuck. He made each one of them feel like they were the only ones and they were so special and they had a special connection, even though he recycled a lot of the nicknames he used for them.
Exactly. And I think that whole thing about how he's special and I related to Michael Jackson, I think that came from Michael himself. I think that's Michael telling him those things, like, oh, you treat me like everybody else, you see, because you already know what it's like to be famous. And I think that all comes from him. But we saw this before with Milo Yiannopoulos. Do you know who that is?
Yes.
Yeah. So remember when he came out and said that he was molested by his priest and another gentleman, and he said, well, it didn't hurt me. It didn't bother me. That's what this sounded like to me, without him admitting that Michael Jackson did anything. But that sort of, well, it didn't hurt me, so it's not a big deal. I think that's how a lot of these victims view it, and why so many don't come forward is they just don't want to feel as though they could have been affected by this.
Very interesting. And it's interesting that he's still repeating Michael Jackson's, if you are correct, and those were Michael Jackson's words, that you treat me like I'm everyone else, you don't treat me like I'm a big star. That how powerful that he's still repeating those words so many years later.
I 100% believe that came from Michael himself. Absolutely.
So we're coming up on an hour. Do you have some time to do a part 2?
Oh, sure. Okay. I'm free.
Okay, great. So stay tuned with the Great Tuesday Money.